Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. On the phone with me today, I have Raj Mukherjee in San Francisco, California. Raj is the Senior Vice President of Product at Indeed.com. Indeed is the world's #1 job website with over 200 million visitors a month from over 60 countries. In addition to Indeed, Raj has also worked at a number of other organizations, including GoDaddy, Google, and Microsoft. Raj, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much for having me in your great show.
Great. Well, so I was at Indeed Interactive recently. I've talked about it on the podcast a couple of times, and you guys had this really awesome exhibit where you had all your different products kind of laid out, and I happened to come across one of the folks there at Indeed named Josh, and he talked to me about this product called Indeed Prime that I had never heard about, but the tagline is called is "Get Hired Within a Month, Job Search Not Required," which is really impressive. So I'd just love to pick your brain about it a little bit. And can you help us to understand what exactly is Indeed Prime?
You know, let me, before I jump into what Indeed Prime is, it's almost probably a good thing to talk about the tech talent shortage that exists broadly in the industry. If you look at the tech industry, I mean, every single company is becoming a software company, right? And this has been happening for the last decade, where at Indeed today, we are finding that companies which are not necessarily tech companies, they have more software job openings than the traditional tech companies. For example, GE and Capital One, they have more software job openings than Google or Facebook.
Oh, wow.
So you're realizing, it is a pretty interesting situation where the world is being turned upside down. Every single company is becoming a software company. And when you think about why that is happening, it's pretty simple. Like if you look at, let's take the automotive industry, right? So you have Tesla building self-driving cars, but GMs, the Toyotas, and the Fords of the world, they have to respond as well. And they have to hire the machine learning engineers, they have to hire other software engineers in order to be able to compete effectively with Tesla. So it's going to happen in every industry, and that's why I keep saying every single company is becoming a software company. And that leads to a very high talent shortage for top software engineers. And when I say top software engineers, I mean, there is a talent shortage for software engineers, period. But if you are at the very best of the software engineers, and if you have skill sets that are extremely high in demand, you are going to be constantly contacted by recruiters, and more than likely, you are also not going into job search and looking for a lot of jobs yourself because you're so high in demand and getting contacted so many times, you're probably turned off. And that's why our tagline is like, look, you don't have to do job search, you don't have to do anything. We will get you the best jobs that meet your preferences. And that's what Prime is. Prime is a platform for matching top-performing tech talents with companies that are desperately looking for that tech talent. So it solves that talent gap for companies, and it solves the problem that top tech talent has, which is, I'm not really looking for jobs, neither am I at the point where when I say I'm not looking for jobs, meaning I'm not going and searching for jobs, but I am looking for an opportunity. But I'm looking for that best opportunity that meets my criteria. And how are you going to solve that problem? And so Indeed Prime, really from a job seeker standpoint, is a dream come true, where for them, they are able to use this platform to express what they want and only have the companies that meet the criteria that they're setting be able to contact them. And from a company standpoint, it offers them access to a curated pool of top performers. And these top performers, again, we'll go into how we do that, but these are the very best of the tech industry.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So that at the very highest level is what Indeed Prime is.
That's great. So you mentioned it focuses on the tech industry. What sorts of jobs would someone be looking for who's using Indeed Prime? I mean, is it just engineering or what other kinds of jobs would be available on Indeed Prime?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Tech industry is diverse. It's not just one type of job. And there are lots of types of jobs that are available on the Prime platform for these individuals who are becoming part of the Prime platform, right? So you have software engineering jobs. The software engineering is very diverse. You can have network engineering jobs. You can have developer ops jobs. You can have UX jobs. You can have product management jobs. So there's a wide variety of tech jobs that we're looking at. And even in user experience, there are different types of user experience jobs, whether it be a visual design job or whether it be an interaction designer job. So broadly speaking, there is a wide selection of jobs that are available in the tech platform. And from our perspective, what we are doing is wherever there is a high demand for a type of role or a type of skill. So a type of skill might be, hey, we are looking for Android engineers with very specific skills about building mobile apps on Android. And so that may be a skill that we're looking for, and the actual role there is a software engineering role. Or it could be a network engineer role. And those are the types of things that we are surfacing up in the Prime platform.
That's so interesting. In preparation for the interview today, I actually went out and created an account on the Indeed Prime application or on the website. And just before the interview, I actually got a rejection email because I no longer, I didn't put in like my engineering. I just sort of put in my present sort of occupation. How do you decide who gets in and who gets sort of this rejection email? I mean, you must be really looking at these in detail.
We do look at this in very painful detail, both with machines curating and understanding what needs to be looked for, and also at the same time human beings being involved in the process, right? So it's a combination, as is the case with many other products at Indeed. But what we really look for is your education, like where did you go to school, and what kind of work experience have you had, and what kind of coding skills, especially if you're applying for a software engineering role, what kind of coding skills have you had? Right, so those are the three basic benchmarks we look for. But that's not the only thing. And one of the very unique parts about Indeed Prime platform, there are people who may not meet the education criteria or the work experience criteria, but they may be put into a pool based on coding assessments that we put them through. And so we call these people, so if you think about one set of people as people who have great education experience, like I told you, somebody went to Stanford University, is working for the last 5 years at Google, and is working on machine learning and has top-notch Java skills. You'd say, okay, great, I want to put that person in the Prime platform based on the coding skills, education, and work experience. That works. That's one set of candidates. But there is also a set of candidates who may have, I'll pick another, same Stanford University, or another university, pick your favorite university, Berkeley, where I went to school. So let's say somebody went to Berkeley and has a degree in psychology or has a degree in other degree in humanities, has very limited work experience, and has not demonstrated coding skills in a job. But that person may be put through, based on that background, based on the skill sets that we have seen, we may put them through, and we do put them through a coding assessment test. Because software coding skills can be evaluated online. And so once they go through that process, they may come up to the very top. I mean, we have people who get ranked in the top 5-10% of those coding skills in those tests. They end up performing at the same level, if not higher level, as the people who are graduating from these other top schools with the education and work experience that we're talking about.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is very interesting, and we call these people the hidden gems.
That's perfect. Well, so the tests that they're taking, the technical tests or the coding tests, are they taking those online?
They are taking those online. That's right.
Okay, and is it something that
They're
they
also and we also run coding contests from time to time.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So do they take the technical tests or the coding tests, do they take them in advance before the companies consider them for a job, or do they take them after they're being evaluated?
No, before they are considered by any company.
Interesting. And so speaking of being evaluated by certain companies, I did notice it looks like the job seeker can hide their profile from certain companies. Is that right?
That is very true. And look, I mean, one of the core things about Indeed, I know you know Indeed pretty well, so I skipped any info about Indeed, but quite frankly, we take job seekers' privacy as one of the most important things at Indeed. We value that more than anything else. And everything that we do at the end of the day is about job seekers. And this might sound like, oh, we don't care about employers. It's not that we don't care about employers. We just fundamentally believe that if we do the right thing for job seekers, that means we're doing the right thing for employers as well. And from our perspective, giving candidates the option to hide profiles is part of the privacy setting that they want. And we do the same thing with Indeed Resume. Job seekers are in complete control of their privacy options.
That's great. I definitely know because, if you're looking for a job and your company finds out, there's a potential you could be let go. So having that privacy is really important to being able to use a product like Indeed Prime.
It's incredibly important, and not to derail too much, but there are obviously other social networks where you may be tempted to share the fact that you are looking for a job, and that's very dangerous.
Oh, yes.
Because it does. And so that's where we feel being part of the Indeed Prime family for a job seeker allows them to have that control over their privacy. They know which companies are they're getting presented to, and they're doing it in a way that's beneficial to them.
Well, so speaking of privacy, I wanted to kind of we touched on a couple of the things that when you're signing up for Indeed Prime that you have to provide. But I think there were some other things that when I went through it that I provided as well. I think there was sort of like other sort of preferences, a summary and links about myself. There was a calendar actually, which I think was the calendar. Is it to give your schedule for when you're available for interviews?
I think you hit the nail right there.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do, again, going back to that core philosophy, one of the things job seekers and employers struggle with is, hey, how do I get you on your calendar, and how do I make that process efficient?
Right.
Because we have all been hiring managers. I know in your background you've hired a lot of people. Same for me, and same for many people who will probably be listening to this podcast. And quite frankly, scheduling an interview can be challenging at times.
Right.
And you go back and forth like multiple times. I was just looking at some of my past situations where it took days to schedule this. With the tool that we are offering, we're trying to make it such that the job seeker can come in and basically share the preferences on times that are available for them. And so then an employer can actually block that time, and vice versa. I think it's a very easy way for us to enable both employer and job seeker to find the appropriate time to conduct that initial phone screen that oftentimes takes way longer than it should.
Absolutely. One other area I think I saw was I think there was an option to provide what level of security clearance that you have. Is that right?
That's right.
And is it because I guess certain companies require like a certain level of security clearance in their technical staff, or what's kind of the reasoning there?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and some of the things that we constantly do at Indeed is we start to respond to what the market is asking us to do.
Sure.
And so, as we launched in Washington D.C., we suddenly realized there are lots of companies that are government contractors. Heck, there are a lot of government jobs out there, right? So, how do we make sure that those particular jobs, which require security clearance at a certain level, we are able to fill them?
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Again, like one of the beautiful things about working at Indeed is the focus on us learning from the data that we have and what our clients are saying and how we are responding to it. And that is an example of where we have responded fast to what people have been asking for.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I actually have a friend of mine from college who is currently in the process of hiring a couple of engineers for his company, which is a government contracting company. And when we talked about it, he mentioned to me, whoever I hire, they need to have a certain level of security clearance. Like this is a basic requirement that we have here. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really interesting that that's so important, but it makes a lot of sense.
It does. It is so important. When we talk to the government contractors, we realize how important that is for their selection criteria.
Right, right. Well, so I'm curious. So I had never heard about Indeed Prime, I'm sad to say, but I think it's probably because of where I happen to live, because I don't think folks here are using it as much. So I wanted to ask you, one question is, generally speaking, which cities is Indeed Prime the most active in? Which cities, if we live in these cities, we should definitely check it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think let me give the broader answer actually on the where are we located, and then I'll give you the cities where we are very active on. So we are currently in 22 markets, metros, in US, UK, Ireland, and Canada. And I'll give you some examples of those cities: Austin, Boston, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., that's in U.S. But outside of U.S., when you think about countries, like in Canada, we are in Toronto. In Ireland, we're in Dublin. In London, and we are in United Kingdom, we're in London. So broadly, we are both global and local, and we have expanded into all these 22 markets. And in some of these markets, we are definitely bigger than others. I'll give you a couple of markets which are pretty important for us. For example, San Francisco Bay Area. Makes sense. It's the mecca of tech, and it's not a surprise that in San Francisco we find both demand and supply to be constrained in unique ways, and so we are doing our best to help companies meet their growing demands and also find the right kind of supply.
That's really interesting. That's interesting. Well, so what if we live in a city that's not on the list? I mean, is it still an option for us to use Indeed Prime?
Absolutely. We all the time encourage candidates who are interested in Prime and interested in relocating. So, for example, you mentioned you're in Memphis, so great. Like if you want to move to any of the locations any of the markets that we are open in, absolutely apply, and just there's a little checkbox that says I'm open to relocation, and that's it.
That's so interesting. That's very good. Well, so as a kind of a side note, I personally have a fascination with Dublin because of all this sort of change that's going on there and the tech companies that are opening locations there. But as I've talked to folks who are in Dublin, there are a lot of requirements around sort of visas because it's tricky to relocate to a completely different country. Most of the people who use Indeed Prime in Ireland, are there ever people who are looking to move internationally that are using it, or are they mainly people who are in the local market?
There are people who do express, especially I think you mentioned something very interesting, especially the European markets, right? When you are in the EU, you could be in Eastern Europe, and you could be very interested in moving to Dublin, right? So that becomes, it's a part of a larger EU market. So the interest in relocation is significantly higher in the European market than it is from U.S. to Europe. But there are instances where people are expressing those kind of interests. I think what we are slowly going to find out over time is people are going to want to move to specific tech hubs. And that is just a natural byproduct of people wanting to live in a particular place. I call this, maybe if I can take a little bit of a detour.
Sure.
If you go back 100 years or 200 years in the industrial economy world, people used to live in a particular place because there were factories, right? So people would relocate to a particular, factories would get created in a particular city, like whether it be Manchester, United Kingdom, or whether it be in places in Ohio, you would essentially have large factories and people would move there. That has changed. In the new world, I call it job seekers are deeply caring about their flexibility, their interest in what location they want to stay in. In fact, the compensation still stack ranks as a very important factor, but location and flexibility in your job are the two other very important factors that take into account.
Totally.
And so in that world, if you are interested in living in London, London is one of the cities where people love to go and stay. If you're interested in living in London as a job seeker, you are going to basically put that as part of your preference, and you want to relocate to that place. Now, Post-Brexit, what is going to happen, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball there, but certainly today, even now, it is a desirable place for people to go and stay. So they would want to move there, and jobs are moving there. So it's the opposite effect, right? So people are moving to a place where they want to stay, and jobs or companies are deciding that because there is a great supply of talent there, I'm going to move my job there. That's very different. I think it's a phenomenon that has happened because of the revolution we are seeing in tech, and because every single company is becoming a software company.
Absolutely. Speaking of sort of cities, the one that it makes me think of, when I visited Sydney, Australia, I spoke with a number of tech folks there a few years ago, and they kept telling me that their very best tech talent was moving away either to Europe or to the U.S. And so they were really struggling to find tech talent, and they were more open to like Americans relocating than what I found when I visited Europe. And so anyway, I'm sure a tool like this would be super helpful to them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, at Indeed, we have one big global office in Tokyo. We have multiple Indeed tech centers. We have offices in San Francisco, Seattle, in Austin, and then one big global office in Tokyo. And we have hired, it's funny, every time I go to the Tokyo office, I keep telling them this is my favorite office because it's got so many nationalities. It's funny, I would have never associated office in Japan to be so diverse.
Sure.
But it is. It's the most diverse office we have.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think with technology, people, companies are willing to relocate employees, and the tech talent is used to relocating, and they're able to go into new cities that they're interested in.
Right. It's a mix, right? We obviously want to nurture local talent. We want to grow that there's absolute interest, even as our core mission, helping people find the best job. We want people who are located in that particular location to have the best job.
Right.
But at the same time, if somebody's interested in relocation, then we should facilitate that as well.
Right, absolutely. Well, I'm curious. So I know that Indeed Prime is just a portion of the users that you have on Indeed. I'm curious if you're able to share with us about how many people are using Indeed Prime, like how many sort of tech talent people are signed up today.
Actually, I will give you the number, but let me walk you through a little bit of how the Indeed Prime qualification works.
Okay.
So I mentioned at the very beginning that we look at coding skills, education, work experience. So imagine that there's a lot of people who are interested in Indeed Prime. They apply for Indeed Prime, quote unquote, like you did, right? You come in and we look at your experience, and we then determine whether you are going to be a good fit for the roles and skills that are in the platform. And once we have determined that you're part of the Indeed Prime family, we then again double check and make sure that you're really going to actively look for a job. It is very important for us to make sure that you're not doing it for quote unquote just validating your own personal ego or satisfaction. And once we find that you're actively looking for a job, we put you in the Prime platform. So from an employer perspective, you have pre-qualified and highly motivated job seekers who are in the platform with their own privacy settings, of course. And what ends up happening is people get 90% response rate.
Wow.
And it is amazing. I am not joking. I've been a hiring manager for the last 15 years or so, maybe. I think I've been lucky when I've seen 20% response rate.
Right.
So 90% response rate with more than 50% positive response rate. That's something that is incredibly powerful about the Prime platform.
Wow.
And we believe that reduces the time that goes waste in sourcing talent that may not be really active or may not be qualified. And we don't want to waste. Time is money. It's very precious. So we don't want to do that. And so, from our perspective, by definition, we are going to have a small pool of very highly engaged job seekers who are going to respond to your needs of the jobs that you have in your platform. So having said that, right now, we have over 3,000 candidates using Prime.
Wow.
And we have a ton of interest. Yeah, it's a pretty large number. And again, large number, given that these are very top talent and talent that normally doesn't respond to any outreach.
Right.
And we know there is a ton of interest from candidates using Prime. Like in the second quarter of this year, 52,000 job seekers signed up to use Prime.
Wow. That is so interesting. So I'm curious, I know that everyone listening is wondering, well, how much does this cost? And so can you tell us a little bit about that? Does it cost us as a job seeker?
No, funnily enough, no, and it's not funnily enough. I think that's the right thing that we keep saying every single day. We fundamentally believe that for job seekers, the services we provide should feel natural and should be given out for free. And for our perspective, there's absolutely no cost as a job seeker to sign up for Prime. Now, there is obviously a process of selection that they have to go through, but beyond that, there is nothing else. You can just go in and you can sign up.
That's great. Well, so you mentioned that we have to be, if we sign up for Prime, we have to be an active, job seeker, and we have to stay engaged. How long is there a time limit for how long, like once we sign up for Prime, if we're qualified, is there a time limit on how long we can be a Prime member?
Yeah, so that leads to a very interesting part of the Prime platform's value prop. As a job seeker, once you have signed up for Prime, which, as I said, it's free for you to sign up as long as you just provide a resume and you pass the selection criteria. After that, you are assigned a career coach.
Oh,
and
okay.
that career coach is going to work with you to determine what's best for you and how to make sure that your profile is surfacing up appropriately to the employers that you want to work for. And let's say a certain time period has passed, and after that you still are not sure that you want to join any of the jobs. It's typically for us 90 days. At the end of 90 days, you have a discussion with your career coach and decide, is this the right thing for me? Should I continue to be in the Prime platform right now, or should I maybe look for it later on?
Oh, interesting.
So it's basically, hey, if a candidate doesn't land a job or get offers that they're happy with in 3 months, it's time for them to do a self-reflection with the career coach.
Yeah. Well, so what if we go through the process and we do a great job, we get job offers, but they're just not quite the right offers and we turn them down? Are we able to still keep using Prime at that point?
I mean, there's no reason for you not to.
Okay.
I mean, the whole idea is very simple. We want you to be highly engaged and satisfied with the platform. And at the end of it, you may say, look, I looked at several offers. I didn't like any of them. I don't think it's the right time for me to look for a job. I'll come back in another year. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. Well, so on the company side, are there can any company use Prime to hire employees, or are there certain companies that you work with?
We work with a very diverse set of employers. I mean, from, again, as I mentioned, GE and Capital One hiring more software engineers than your favorite tech companies out there, right?
Right.
So I think we have a wide variety of companies, from very small companies looking to use Prime to very large companies across multiple industries, and the diverse set of roles and skills that they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a page actually on your site that listed some of the big name companies. I can't remember them, but they were incredibly impressive. They were definitely the kind of companies that you would want to work for.
We are fortunate. We are very fortunate that the kind of companies that are using our platform, they are the very best that job seekers want to work for.
Yeah.
And I think we can even share as part of our podcast maybe a list of companies that are interested right now are available. The jobs are being on the Prime platform.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. I think this will definitely be helpful because a lot of our listeners are very interested in tech jobs. And if they're like me, they may have had no idea that this, even existed. Well, I wanted to pick your brain.
I mean, totally.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to pick your brain just a little bit about the areas of tech that you see maybe growing or shrinking, and if you could maybe give us any guidance, because I know you kind of get to see what's behind the covers at Indeed, and it seems like there's certain parts of tech that are growing and other parts that may be shrinking. Do you have any insight that you could provide to us about kind of where we should be looking in terms of the type of role?
This question I get a lot, and I probably have no good news for recruiters on this.
Okay.
Because I really don't see anything shrinking in technology anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say I don't have great news for recruiters, it's not like you can reach out to the best candidates and they'll respond immediately. That's not happening anytime soon. The Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts that 1.3 million new software jobs will be needed in the next 10 years.
Mm.
And in that same time period, about 400,000 computer science grads are expected to come into the workforce.
Mm.
So if you think about it, there's a million shortage in software engineering jobs on top of the shortage that exists today.
That is interesting.
When we think of, it is. It's not like this problem is going away. And truly, as more and more companies and more industries, even industries such as agriculture, that are getting disrupted by software or enhanced by software. It's not always disruption. It's a good thing where things are getting enhanced by software. You're going to just have a huge need for technical talent.
Mm-hmm.
And tech jobs are broad, and I see types of jobs that I mentioned, the ones that I talked about, like software engineers, specific types of Java developers, for example, or Android developers, or data scientists. Mm-hmm. These type of jobs, data is the new currency in this new economy, and every company is using artificial intelligence, which is, again, at the back end, it requires gobs and gobs of data to be able to be prescient about what is going to happen. We need data scientists for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, quite frankly, if I were to just make a guess, I don't see anything changing in the tech job market in the next 10 years. But there may be some ups and downs like any economy has, but broadly the trend is upwards.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And, you made a point earlier that when you're qualifying candidates for Indeed Prime, that sometimes you consider those folks that are, I don't know if you said like the diamond in the rough or something, the folks who maybe don't have that computer science degree, but they're self-taught and they know what they're doing. It seems like this shortage almost creates an opportunity for folks who are very sort of entrepreneurial in their learning efforts to kind of grow and get involved in something that they may not otherwise have the degree qualification for.
Yeah, I think there are two very key things we can touch upon there. One is the diversity of tech talent. There's a lot being talked about around the lack of diversity in the tech world. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, that diversity is not going to just get solved automatically. And it's not just a hiring problem. People just immediately say, okay, we are going to have focus more on hiring a particular set of disadvantaged minority, and then suddenly the problem is going to get solved. There is a whole cultural element that needs to be brought forth for companies to be able to retain this talent and grow this talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from the perspective of what you're pointing out, it's not like having a computer science degree. I have a computer science degree from a good school in India, and I've had experience as an engineer, but I don't think I'm that much better than anyone else who has been home-taught or self-taught, mm-hmm. and who has been able to go in and learn those skills. In fact, I would say that person is more passionate than me, mm-hmm. and probably is going to end up being a better software engineer than I ever would. Mm-hmm. And so giving that person an opportunity to exhibit their skill sets through well-known mechanics of assessing their skills is the right thing to do to bring in a talent pool that we are not tapping into. And we ran a very recent survey. I'm pretty sure Christine can send you offline again the mm-hmm. numbers associated with it, so you can probably plug that in. But broadly, I think we are finding that more and more HR managers in different companies, as well as hiring managers, are being open to the idea that, you don't have to have a computer science degree. You don't have to have gone to the best schools in the world to get a job in my company, as long as we know your coding skills are up to a certain level that we need mm-hmm. for you to be productive from day one. Mm-hmm. And then we are willing to help you get to the next level by investing in you. Mm-hmm. I think that is a source of talent that I continuously see as evolving. The other one that is a bit more controversial is around the coding schools. So there are lots of schools of thought. Some companies say they don't want to entertain people from coding schools. I personally have a view where I think coding schools can be a complementary asset to a mm-hmm. company in looking for talent. Mm-hmm. At Indeed, we have hired from coding schools as interns, and in Seattle, for example, we are sponsoring a particular coding school where we are getting women from this particular coding school from disadvantaged minority groups. And we are finding that to be, again, a nascent but a growing source of talent pool for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so from our perspective, look, I mean, at the end of the day, if there is a million shortage, you're just not going to create a million shortage solution by not looking at different varieties of solutions. You have to look at different varieties of solutions, which includes tapping into a pool that may not have been used in the past.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I like your point about coding schools, actually. There is a coding school that started here in Memphis that's now in Nashville, but it's nationwide, and it specifically targets people who are coming out of the military, the U.S. military, because you have a lot of folks who went into the military around age 20 who retire around age 40, and they need to kind of start over. And it's a lot of folks who still have time left in their career. They're intelligent, they're hardworking, they're disciplined, and they don't really have a lot of options. And so this coding school in particular targets the folks that are retired military just as they're coming out, and it teaches them a new skill, which is, I think it's excellent. And why not, really?
I mean, getting our veterans back into the workforce with jobs that they're excited about and that can meaningfully help them get back into civilian life, I think that's an important part of everything that any company should be doing. And so that's a classic example of where, a military degree, quote unquote, if you consider a rotation as a military degree, right, that has taught you so many things that are valuable in a civilian job. And so how do you translate that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm always surprised when I talk to folks who come out of the military and they'll tell me, for example, that they manage people, and I'll say, how many people? And they'll say, I don't know, about 250. And I'll think, wow, like you have no idea all the experience that you've gathered. This seems so normal to you. But to somebody in another company, like a normal corporate setting, managing 250 people would be a really big deal. So I think the technical skills are a really nice complement to those leadership skills and other skills that are developed, during their time in the military. This has been really helpful, and I really hope everyone listening will go and check out Indeed Prime. I'm going to put links to it in the show notes. But where do you suggest that we go to learn more about Indeed Prime and kind of your work there at Indeed?
It's very easy. Go to Indeed.com/Prime, and we will certainly share the link with you. But very easy, Indeed.com/Prime.
Awesome. Well, Raj, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Angela. Have a great, wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks to those of you who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to Angela@CopelandCoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach. And on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out. Subscribe on iTunes and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.